A carved stone can hold a warning for thousands of years. These inscribed stones predicted great floods, and their messages echo through myths from every corner of the ancient world. By the end of this journey, you will see the line between ancient myth and historical truth in a completely new light. What secrets did these cultures carve into rock for us to find? How could stories of a global deluge appear in civilizations that never met? The stones are waiting to tell their story, and it challenges everything we thought we knew about our past. What would it mean if these prophecies were based on a real and terrifying event? A massive, weathered monolith stands alone in a remote landscape, its surface a tapestry of strange symbols carved deep into the stone. These are not random markings, they are prophetic stones, physical objects intentionally inscribed with what many believe are warnings of a great deluge. Unlike a simple historical record that recounts events of the past, the text on these stones feels predictive. They speak of a future catastrophe, suggesting the carvers possessed a powerful belief or even knowledge of a coming disaster. The choice of stone itself is a message. It tells us they wanted this warning to endure for millennia, to outlast empires and languages, and to carry a vital truth to generations far in the future. This act of carving a prophecy implies a desperate need to communicate across time, a belief that the threat of overwhelming water was so great it could happen again. Scholars have long debated what these inscriptions truly represent. Were they genuine premonitions of events yet to come, or were they encoded memories of a real, devastating flood that scarred the collective memory of ancient peoples, a trauma so profound it was projected forward as a future warning? Perhaps they are purely mythological, stories meant to explain the world's chaos, yet their existence is an undeniable global phenomenon. From the highlands of the Americas to the river valleys of Asia, these stones whisper the same terrifying story of water, destruction, and a fragile chance for renewal. This shared narrative points to something deep within the human psyche, a universal archetype of a cleansing flood. To understand their secret, we must first understand how they were made. The methods used to create these eternal warnings are as fascinating as the messages they carry. The stone itself holds the first layer of its secret history. To understand the prophecy, we must first understand the physical object, the very rock that carries the message. This begins with a meticulous scientific process, a geological and material analysis that treats the stone not as a mystical artifact, but as a piece of physical evidence. Imagine a researcher in a lab carefully extracting a minute sample from the edge of a weathered tablet. This tiny fragment is a key to unlocking centuries. Geologists can analyze the type of rock and its unique mineral signature, effectively matching it to a specific quarry. This tells us where the stone came from. Was it sourced locally or transported over vast distances along ancient trade routes? The choice of material is itself a statement. Many of these flood warning stones are made of basalt, a volcanic rock known for its extreme hardness and resistance to erosion. This was a deliberate choice, a selection for permanence, signaling that the message was meant to endure for ages. The surface of the stone also tells a story. The patina, that thin layer of weathering that forms on exposed rock over time, can be scientifically dated. Techniques like lichenometry, which studies the growth of lichens on the surface, or more advanced methods involving cosmogenic nuclides that measure how long the rock has been exposed to cosmic radiation, provide a minimum age for the carvings. This tells us without a doubt that the inscription is centuries old, not a modern creation. Then there are the tool marks themselves, Under high-powered microscopes, the grooves and scratches left by ancient tools reveal the technology of the carvers. Were they using hard stone chisels, bronze points, or perhaps even iron implements? The precision and style of these marks speak volumes about the culture's level of technological sophistication. This entire scientific approach builds an objective, physical timeline. It separates genuine ancient artifacts from clever forgeries, grounding our investigation in verifiable fact. By knowing precisely when the stone was quarried, how it was carved, and how long it has been weathering the elements, we can start to ask a more focused question. Could this message refer to a real, datable event in history? To answer that, we must move from the language of rock to the language of symbols and decipher the words themselves. The stone's material truth is only half the story. Its surface holds a different kind of code, one of language and symbol. An epigrapher might spend a lifetime hunched over a single rubbing, a paper impression of the carved lines, comparing each strange curve and angle to known scripts. This is the painstaking art of decipherment, where the goal is to hear the voices of the carvers across the centuries. Many of these floodstones present a monumental challenge. They are written in scripts that are only partially understood, like certain Mesoamerican glyphs or the earliest forms of Semitic alphabets. There is no Rosetta Stone for these prophecies. Translators must rely on comparative analysis, looking for repeated patterns and matching them to words in related, known languages, slowly building a vocabulary from the ground up. Beyond the words themselves are the symbols. A series of wavy lines might seem obviously like water to us, but in another culture's artistic tradition, those same lines could represent chaos, the underworld, or even a serpent deity. A carved figure with arms raised could be a person drowning, or it could be a priest in a posture of prayer or supplication. The correct interpretation depends entirely on understanding the cultural lens through which the symbol was created. The context of the phrase is equally revealing. Is the text a direct warning from a deity thundering through a prophet? Is it a king's decree, instructing his people to build arks or move to higher ground? Or is it the recorded vision of a seer describing a terrifying dream of rising waters? The grammar and syntax hold these clues. Modern technology is now accelerating this ancient craft. Computational linguistics and artificial intelligence can analyze thousands of inscriptions at once, detecting subtle patterns of word order and symbol combinations that might escape the human eye. These digital tools can propose statistical probabilities for translations, offering new paths forward for texts that have resisted understanding for generations. When a breakthrough happens, when a handful of key phrases finally snap into meaning, the stone is transformed. It ceases to be a mere curiosity and becomes a coherent document, a window into a moment of profound crisis or belief. Deciphering the language provides the key, but to truly understand the lock it fits, we must step into the world of the people who carved it. This requires a deep dive into their entire way of life, an anthropological investigation of the culture that felt such an urgent need to warn the future. The true meaning of a prophecy stone is not unlocked in a laboratory, but within the world of its creators. To understand why a society would carve such a permanent warning, we must stand where they stood. Look at the landscape surrounding the stone. Was it erected on a high mountain pass, a place that would remain dry even if the valleys drowned? Or was it placed at a bustling crossroads, a deliberate effort to broadcast its message to as many people as possible? Its location is the first powerful clue to its purpose. This is the work of anthropology, piecing together the cultural framework that gave the stone its urgency. We must ask who these people were. Were they a theocracy ruled by priests who interpreted the will of angry gods? In such a society, a flood prophecy could be a tool of social control, a divine mandate to obey. Or were they a practical kingdom, led by a ruler who used the inscription to command his people to build granaries or move to higher ground, a royal decree etched in stone for all to see? The motive changes entirely based on the society that held the chisel. To find these answers, anthropologists dive into the rich tapestry of associated myths. The story of a great flood is a global echo. The Epic of Gilgamesh from ancient Mesopotamia tells of the god warning the hero Utnapishtim to build a boat and save the seed of all living things. The Hebrew Bible recounts Noah receiving his detailed instructions from God. In ancient Greece, Zeus sends a flood to destroy humanity, from which only Deucalion and his wife survive. These are not just stories, they are cultural memories, and when a stone's message aligns with these widespread narratives, it suggests we are hearing a universal human response to a shared trauma. Beyond written records, we listen to the oral traditions passed down through countless generations. An elder's story told by firelight, a ritual reenactment of a great escape from rising waters. These living practices can preserve the emotional truth and the practical intent behind the prophecy in a way a static inscription cannot. When we combine the stone's location, the structure of its society, and the power of its stories, the object transforms. It is no longer an isolated artifact. It becomes a vital piece of a living culture's attempt to make sense of a terrifying world, to impose order on chaos, and to send a message about survival across the abyss of time. This holistic view begs the next logical question. Was this profound, widespread fear born purely from myth, or was it ignited by a real, physical event that left its mark on the very geology of our planet? The ground beneath our feet holds its own memory of these ancient catastrophes. A geologist extracts a core sample from a deep lake bed, pulling up a slender cylinder of earth that reveals a stunning timeline. Within that sample, normal layers of fine silt are violently interrupted by a thick band of coarse gravel and debris. This is the unmistakable signature of a massive, sudden inundation. A flood of such power it ripped the landscape apart and redeposited it in a single, chaotic event. This is not myth, this is physical data. The same story is frozen in ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica, where layers of ice preserve evidence of rapid climate shifts that would have melted glaciers on a continental scale, releasing colossal volumes of water. One of the most compelling theories is the Black Sea Deluge hypothesis. It posits that around 7,600 years ago, rising global sea levels caused the Mediterranean Sea to catastrophically breach a natural dam at the Bosporus. What followed was a waterfall 200 times more powerful than Niagara Falls, roaring for months on end. A vast freshwater lake, which may have been a cradle for early farming communities, was transformed into the salty Black Sea, its shoreline expanding outward at a rate of a mile or more each day. Any human settlements along those ancient shores would have witnessed a wall of water swallowing their world, a trauma that would echo for generations. We see similar evidence in places like the channeled scablands of Washington state, a bizarre, scarred landscape that was once a mystery. Geologists now understand it was carved in a matter of days by glacial lake outburst floods, where ice dams holding back lakes the size of entire states would suddenly rupture. The resulting torrents scoured the land down to bedrock, moving with a force that is almost incomprehensible. Coral reefs and ocean floor cores add another layer of proof, showing periods where sea levels rose not gradually, but in dramatic, terrifying pulses, drowning coastlines and river valleys that were home to early civilizations. These were not isolated incidents, they were global, geologically documented disasters. The psychological impact of such events is almost beyond measure. For the survivors, the world itself had turned against them. The very stability of the land was an illusion shattered by the terrifying power of water. It is from this crucible of shared trauma that the flood myths were born. The inscribed stones, then, are not merely fantasies. They are the cultural scars left by real, earth-shattering events. They represent a desperate attempt to make sense of the unimaginable, to codify a warning for future generations who might one day face the same cyclical fury of nature. This direct link between geological fact and cultural memory finds its most powerful expression in one of humanity's oldest written stories, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Deep within the British Museum, ancient clay tablets rest in hushed display cases. Their surfaces are crowded with the precise, wedge-shaped marks of cuneiform, the world's oldest known writing system. These are not dry administrative records. They are the Mesopotamian flood tablets, and they contain the earliest written account of a global deluge, a story that would echo for millennia. The most famous version is found in the Epic of Gilgamesh, where the hero Gilgamesh seeks out the immortal flood survivor, Utnapishtim. The god warned Utnapishtim of the god's plan to destroy humanity, instructing him to build a giant boat. He was told to take aboard his family and the seed of all living things. This narrative, etched into clay over 4,000 years ago, is strikingly familiar. The parallels to later flood stories, like that of Noah, are impossible to ignore, suggesting a common origin point deep in our shared past. But what makes these tablets so compelling is their startling specificity. They are not vague prophecies. They provide detailed, almost technical descriptions. The text gives the exact dimensions of the boat, a vast vessel, and states the storm raged for 6 days and 6 nights. Scholars like Irving Finkel have dedicated their lives to these details. His study of one particular tablet led to a breakthrough. He identified a specific cuneiform sign that described the boat not as a conventional ship, but as a giant coracle, a round, basket-like boat waterproofed with bitumen, a design perfectly suited to the riverine environment of Mesopotamia. This is not the stuff of pure fantasy. It is the language of practical construction. The Sumerian King List, another crucial clay document, treats the flood not as a myth but as a historical watershed. It divides the line of kings into those who ruled before the Great Flood and those who ruled after, framing the deluge as a real event that reset civilization itself. These tablets were the inscribed stones of their day. Baked in kilns for permanence, they were intended to preserve a core cultural memory across generations. The persistence of this story across centuries of Babylonian and Assyrian culture tells us something vital. This was more than a fable. It was a foundational belief, a traumatic memory so deeply ingrained it became a pillar of their worldview. This powerful concept, born on the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates, would not remain contained. It was destined to travel, carried by trade and conquest, and find a new home in the emerging traditions of another culture, where it would be written not on clay but on scrolls and become one of the most famous stories ever told. The story of Noah is a cornerstone of faith, yet its foundations are far older than the book of Genesis. Its deep roots stretch back to the Mesopotamian flood tablets, to the story of Utnapishtim that Gilgamesh himself sought out. The parallels are too precise to be coincidence. Both narratives feature a single righteous man, secretly warned by a deity of a coming cataclysm. Both involve the meticulous construction of a massive vessel, the preservation of all animal life, and the terrifying flood that obliterates everything else. The climactic moment, the sending of birds to find dry land, is identical in both accounts. This is not a case of one story copying another. but rather of a powerful, foundational memory being reshaped for a new culture and a new purpose. The Hebrew scribes transformed the ancient Mesopotamian tale, infusing it with a profound moral and theological framework. In the biblical version, the flood is not a result of capricious gods, but a divine judgment upon a world consumed by wickedness. The focus shifts from the survival of one man to a covenant between God and all of humanity, symbolized by the rainbow, a promise that such destruction would never come again. This narrative became the ultimate prophetic warning, not carved on a single stone, but inscribed onto scrolls and into the very soul of a people, teaching lessons of righteousness, obedience, and divine mercy. This powerful story inevitably sparked a quest for physical evidence. For centuries, explorers have scoured the slopes of Mount Ararat in Turkey, searching for the remains of Noah's Ark. These expeditions are driven by a deep desire to anchor faith in tangible proof, to find the very planks that weathered the deluge. Yet despite tantalizing claims and alleged sightings, no conclusive archaeological evidence has ever been verified. This enduring search highlights a fascinating tension, the powerful interplay between a story that lives in the heart and the scientific desire to confirm it in the earth. The biblical flood represents a crucial adaptation of the global flood myth. It took a shared memory of catastrophe and refined it, giving it a new moral weight and a central place in a world religion. Its enduring power demonstrates how these ancient warnings were constantly repurposed, their core truth reshaped to guide new civilizations. This process of cultural translation was not unique to the Old World. Far across the Atlantic, in the jungles of the Americas, entirely separate civilizations were carving their own profound warnings into stone, creating prophecies that echo with a strangely familiar fear. Deep in the humid jungles of the Maya world, stone stelae rise from the earth like ancient sentinels. Their surfaces, covered in intricate glyphs, tell a story not of kings and conquests alone, but of a far more profound catastrophe. These are the Maya floodstones, and their message reveals a civilization obsessed with the cyclical nature of destruction. For the Maya, a great flood was not a one-time punishment from a single angry god, but a predictable cosmic reset. Their entire cosmology was built on the idea of world ages, each one culminating in a different form of annihilation. One age was said to have ended in a fiery rain, another by jaguars devouring humanity. And one, crucially, was washed away by a mighty deluge. This was not the end of everything, but the necessary cleansing that allowed for a new beginning. The rain god Chok was not merely a bringer of life-giving water, he was also an agent of apocalyptic fury. In the Dresden Codex, one of the few surviving Maya books, vivid illustrations show Chok appending enormous celestial jars, unleashing a torrent that drowns the world. The imagery is stark and terrifying, a divine decision to wipe the slate clean. This concept of cyclical disaster is woven into the very fabric of their timekeeping. The famous Maya long count calendar, which so many misunderstood as predicting a single end of the world in 2012, was actually a mechanism for tracking these vast cycles of creation and destruction. Their prophecies were not guesses, they were mathematical certainties based on an observed pattern of time itself. This belief in cyclical floods finds a powerful echo in the Popol Vuh, the sacred text of the Kayich Maya. It describes a previous, failed version of humanity, people carved from wood who were empty and without hearts. Displeased with their creation, the gods sent a great flood to wash them away, followed by a resinous rain from the sky and attacks from their own tools and animals. This is more than a simple flood myth. It is a story about the failure to meet divine expectations, a warning that humanity itself could be found wanting and face a watery judgment. The incredible specificity of Maya calendrical records opens a fascinating door. Could their prophecies of a great flood be encoded memories of real, devastating environmental events? The Yucatan Peninsula is exceptionally vulnerable to hurricanes and prolonged periods of torrential rain. Geological evidence suggests periods of dramatic sea level rise could have flooded coastal settlements, forcing mass migrations inland. A series of such catastrophes, recorded over generations and then plotted onto their sophisticated calendar, could easily have solidified into the belief that the world itself was periodically reborn through water. For the Maya, the stones were not just historical records, they were prophetic anchors in a universe of repeating cycles. This idea of a land lost to the ocean, a civilization swallowed by the waves as punishment, resonates far beyond the jungles of Central America. It points our gaze across the vast Pacific to the enduring legend of a sunken continent that has captivated imaginations for millennia. High in the thin air of the Andes, a granite monolith known as the Lanzon stands imprisoned in the dark heart of the Chavin de Huanta temple. Its surface is a labyrinth of carved lines, a complex code depicting snarling feline faces and writhing serpentine forms. Some researchers see in this chaos a story of water, a symbolic representation of a world turned to liquid. For the cultures of the Andes, the concept of a great flood was not a singular myth but a recurring reality. They called it Uno Pachacuti, a Quechua phrase meaning world reversal, an event where the entire cosmic order was turned upside down and cleansed by catastrophe. This idea was central to both the ancient Chavin and the later Inca Empire. Inca legends, carefully recorded by Spanish chroniclers after the conquest, tell of a time when the world was drowned. The waters rose so high that only a few people survived by clinging to the highest mountain peaks. The Inca nobility claimed direct descent from these survivors, anchoring their right to rule in this foundational story of aquatic apocalypse. These narratives were not written in books but preserved in the living memory of oral tradition, and perhaps encoded into the intricate knots of the quipu, those mysterious string recording devices. The very geography of their sacred architecture whispers this deep-seated fear. They built their most important sites like Machu Picchu on high, defensible ridges, positions that seem perpetually prepared for another sudden rise of water. This was not a random choice, it was a cultural memory etched into the landscape itself. The geological evidence from the Andes provides a chillingly rational basis for this pervasive dread. The steep slopes of the mountains are prone to colossal landslides, and the high valleys often held vast lakes dammed by unstable glacial ice. When one of these natural dams failed, it would unleash a glacial lake outburst flood, a wall of water, ice, and rock thundering down the valleys with unimaginable force, scouring everything in its path. Any civilization living in the shadow of such mountains would have witnessed these events, and the trauma would be seared into their collective consciousness for 1,000 years. The Andean monoliths, therefore, are more than ritual objects. They are the silent, stony witnesses to a landscape perpetually shaped and shattered by water's raw power. This profound understanding of water as both creator and destroyer resonates across the globe, finding a parallel in the ancient river valleys of the Indian subcontinent, where another great civilization wove its own intricate tapestry of flood and renewal. The story of a great flood flows eastward, finding a profound and philosophical expression in the ancient Vedic traditions of India. On the banks of the sacred Ganges, sages composed hymns that speak not of one world, but of many, each ending in a great dissolution. The story of Manu, the first man, is detailed in texts like the Satapatha Brahmana. In this account, Manu is not warned by a voice from the heavens, but by a small fish pleading for protection. He saves the fish, which grows at an astonishing rate, eventually revealing itself to be an incarnation of the god Vishnu. The great fish then delivers a prophecy of a coming flood that will drown all of creation. It instructs Manu to build a massive boat to take aboard the 7 great sages and the seeds of every plant, and to tie the vessel to its horn. When the deluge comes, the fish tows the boat across the raging waters, eventually leading it to safety on a mountaintop as the floods recede, allowing life to begin anew. Parallels are unmistakable: a divine warning, a survival vessel, and a single righteous man preserving the future of the world. Yet here, the story is framed by a far grander concept, that of Pralaya. Pralaya is the periodic dissolution of the entire universe, a cosmic cycle of creation and destruction where the world is systematically unmade, often by water. This is not a singular punishment for sin, but a necessary, rhythmic process of the cosmos. The flood prophecy is thus transformed from a memory of a past disaster into a promise of a future, inevitable reset. This philosophical framework elevates the narrative, making the flood a cosmic principle rather than a historical anomaly. It was a warning etched not primarily in stone, but into the cultural DNA through oral recitation and sacred texts on palm leaves. The Vedic interpretation presents a deeply metaphysical view of these ancient warnings, a stark contrast to the more historically minded records being kept at the very same time, far to the east, along the Yellow River in ancient China. Along the turbulent banks of the Yellow River, stone stelae stand as silent engineers. One such tablet might not speak of a god's wrath, but of an emperor's decree, detailing a system of canals and dikes built to tame the water. This is the Chinese response to the global flood myth, a story not of escape but of control. The legendary hero here is Emperor Yu the Great, a figure who embodies relentless effort. For 13 years, he is said to have labored, dredging new channels for the raging waters, his hands calloused, his body caked in mud. So dedicated he passed his own home without entering 3 times. His success did not just save people, it earned him the mandate of heaven, the divine right to rule, and founded the Xia dynasty, China's first. This narrative, preserved in ancient texts like the Bamboo Annals, frames the flood as a managerial problem, a challenge for human ingenuity to overcome. The stelae erected for centuries after were the physical proof of this philosophy. They were both practical and political. As hydrological records, they documented water levels and successful engineering projects, creating a permanent archive of what worked. As tools of power, they proclaimed a ruler's virtue and capability. A king who could control the Yellow River was a king who maintained cosmic order, a leader worthy of loyalty. This was a profound departure from other traditions. There is no arc here, no desperate survival. Instead, we see a deep belief in human agency, the idea that through knowledge, tireless work, and social organization, humanity could achieve harmony with the natural world's most destructive forces. The flood was not a punishment to be endured, but a force to be channeled. This pragmatic approach reflects a civilization that saw itself as a partner to nature, not a victim of the gods. It is a powerful, alternative echo of that ancient, shared trauma, one that looks forward to a managed future rather than back at a catastrophic past. Yet, across the vast Pacific, a different kind of echo persists, a legend not of controlled rivers, but of an entire continent lost beneath them. The Lemurian hypothesis pushes the idea of prophetic stones to its ultimate limit. In this 19th century legend, an entire continent called Lemuria supposedly sank beneath the waves of the Indian Ocean. Its inhabitants, an advanced and spiritually enlightened race, saw their doom approaching. Before their world vanished forever, they allegedly encoded their entire knowledge, including prophecies of the coming flood, onto indestructible crystal tablets. These imagined Lemurian stones are said to hold not just a warning, but the secrets of lost technology and profound wisdom, waiting on the ocean floor for the day they are rediscovered. This captivating story began not with mystics but with scientists. Biologists proposed a land bridge to explain why lemur fossils were found in India and Madagascar. When plate tectonics provided the real answer, the sunken continent idea was abandoned by science, but it was eagerly adopted by spiritual movements like theosophy. They transformed Lemuria into a utopian cradle of humanity, a paradise destroyed by its own spiritual failings or perhaps a natural catastrophe. The legend of its stones fulfills a deep human yearning, a belief that a golden age once existed and that its wisdom survived the deluge, hidden just out of reach. This narrative of a lost world leaving behind a coded message is a powerful archetype, one that finds its most famous expression in the story of Atlantis. The Lemurian myth, though entirely fictional, demonstrates how the simple concept of an inscribed warning can evolve into an epic quest for hidden truth, blending geology, myth, and esoteric belief into a single, compelling tale of cataclysm. It shows us that the stones we imagine can be just as powerful as the ones we actually find. Plato's account of Atlantis begins not with a myth, but with a history lesson. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, he describes through the voice of his ancestors a formidable naval power that existed 9,000 years before his own time. This was Atlantis, an island empire located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, boasting a sophisticated culture, advanced engineering, and a concentric capital city of great beauty. Yet for all its glory, Atlantis fell into arrogance and imperial overreach. Its people became morally corrupt, and in a single terrible day and night of earthquakes and floods, the entire island sank beneath the sea, vanishing forever. Plato frames this story not as mere legend, but as a true account passed down from the wise Egyptian priests of Sais. He uses it as a powerful philosophical allegory, a cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris and the cyclical nature of civilizations. The destruction of Atlantis was a divine punishment, a cleansing by water meant to illustrate a profound moral truth. Yet this very ambiguity is what has fueled an endless quest. Did Plato intend for us to search for a real sunken city, or was he crafting the ultimate metaphor for societal collapse? This question has echoed for over 2,000 years, driving explorers and theorists to scour the globe. The idea of Atlantean stones, physical remnants or records that survived the deluge, became a central pillar of later esoteric thought. Theosophists and other alternative historians envisioned these artifacts as crystals or tablets containing the lost wisdom of that advanced race, a tangible message from a drowned world. This belief has sent investigators to locations from the Azores to the Sahara, where they interpret ancient megalithic structures like the Bimini Road or the ruins of Tartessos as potential evidence of the Atlantean civilization. The sheer endurance of this search reveals something fundamental about us. It is a desire to touch the myth, to hold a piece of the story in our hands, and prove that our most captivating tales of catastrophe are rooted in a tangible, physical past. This same compelling drive now draws our attention to a far older and very real site, Göbekli Tepe in modern Turkey. 11,000 years ago, as the last ice age was receding, a group of hunter-gatherers in southeastern Turkey accomplished something that should have been impossible. They quarried, carved, and erected massive stone pillars, each weighing many tons, arranging them into great stone circles. This is Göbekli Tepe, the world's oldest known temple complex. Its T-shaped pillars are a gallery of prehistoric art covered in finely carved reliefs of animals. We see foxes, scorpions, wild boars, and vultures. But we also see serpents and water birds, creatures deeply associated with rivers and deluges. There is no direct inscription here that says the word flood. The message is not written but woven into the symbolism. Some researchers propose that these animal carvings are not random. They could be a symbolic language, an allegorical record of a cataclysm. The theory suggests the site is a preserved memory of a devastating event, perhaps the climatic chaos at the end of the Younger Dryas period, a time of abrupt cooling and then rapid warming that would have caused massive flooding and rising sea levels. Could the serpentine forms represent not just animals, but the coiling, destructive power of water itself? Might the water birds signify a world where the boundaries between land and sea had been permanently blurred? This interpretation transforms Göbekli Tepe from a ritual site into a potential monument to survival. The most compelling mystery is not its construction, but its deliberate burial. Around 8,000 years before the Common Era, someone took the extraordinary step of backfilling the entire complex with earth and stones. This was not an act of vandalism or neglect. It was a careful, laborious process of interment. Why would a culture go to such lengths to bury their most sacred site? One powerful explanation is that they were preserving it. They were creating a time capsule, intending to protect their knowledge and their warning for a future they knew would come. If this is true, then Göbekli Tepe itself becomes the ultimate inscribed stone. It is a prophecy carved not on a tablet, but across an entire landscape, a monumental message about the fragility of human achievement in the face of nature's power. This single site forces us to reconsider the entire timeline of civilization. It suggests that complex societies, with sophisticated mythologies and astronomical knowledge, may have risen and fallen long before the first cities of Mesopotamia. The potential connection to a global cataclysm, whether a great flood or even a cosmic impact event as some have theorized, pushes our gaze from the Earth to the stars. What if the trigger for these ancient warnings was not just terrestrial, but written in the sky itself? A fiery object did not just streak across the sky, it shattered it. The heavens themselves seemed to fracture, raining down not water, but fire and stone. This is the core of the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, a scientific theory that gives terrifying new meaning to the celestial anger described in so many flood myths. Around 12,800 years ago, as the last ice age was finally loosening its grip, a comet may have entered Earth's atmosphere, exploding in a series of airbursts over the North American ice sheet. The immediate effects would have been apocalyptic. The kinetic energy alone would have generated a firestorm, incinerating forests and megafauna alike. The shockwaves would have triggered continent-wide earthquakes, but the real catastrophe came next. The impact punched a hole in the atmosphere, and the immense heat flash struck the Laurentide ice sheet, a continent spanning glacier miles thick. This was not a slow melt. It was a violent, instantaneous liquefaction. Vast reservoirs of trapped meltwater were released in an instant, cascading across the landscape in colossal megafloods that carved out the strange channeled scablands of the Pacific Northwest in a matter of days. The evidence for this cataclysm is written not in stone tablets, but in the earth itself. At archaeological sites dating to this exact period, scientists have found a thin, dark layer rich with microscopic diamonds, known as nanodiamonds, which form only under immense pressure and heat. They have found spikes in platinum, a metal abundant in extraterrestrial objects, and tiny spheres of melted glass that could only have been created by temperatures hotter than the surface of the sun. This is the geological scar of a cosmic bullet. For the scattered bands of humans who witnessed this event, the world ended not with a whimper, but with a roar from the sky. The sun would have vanished behind a cloud of dust and soot, plunging the planet into a volcanic winter. This kicked off a period of abrupt climate reversal called the Younger Dryas, a sudden return to icy conditions that lasted for over 1,000 years. The narrative writes itself. The gods were angry, they sent fire from the heavens, the skies turned black, the waters rose, and the cold gripped the land. This was not a metaphor, it was a lived experience, a trauma so profound it became the foundational story for countless cultures. The connection between comets and floods provides the missing link. It bridges the gap between a celestial omen and a terrestrial disaster, explaining why so many myths pair the two. The fear of the sky and the fear of drowning became one and the same, a memory of a time when the universe itself seemed to turn against humanity. This scientific lens transforms the ancient prophecies. They were not just spiritual warnings, they were the first attempts at disaster science, a way to record and make sense of a global catastrophe that began in the stars. A shaman's trembling hands trace the first symbol into wet clay, a message born not from reason but from a vision. These ancient seers were the original instruments of prophecy, individuals believed to hold a direct line to the gods or the spirit world. Their prophecies were rarely simple guesses about the future. They were active, demanding processes. A priestess might enter a trance induced by sacred smoke, her chants giving voice to the roaring waters she saw engulfing the land. A diviner might read the patterns in a pool of oil or the cracks in a heated tortoise shell, interpreting these signs as portents of a coming deluge. The message itself was often cryptic, a puzzle of symbols and metaphors that required skilled interpretation. This was a sacred science, a way of translating the chaotic language of the divine into a warning their people could understand. Once the vision was received and interpreted, the community faced a critical choice. They could dismiss it as the ravings of a madwoman, or they could act. The decision to carve the prophecy into stone was the ultimate act of belief. It ritualized the message, transforming a fleeting, subjective vision into an objective, permanent decree for all to see. The stone gave the shaman's dream the weight of law and the authority of the gods themselves. In ancient Greece, a city-state facing turmoil would send emissaries on a long journey to consult the oracle at Delphi. The Pythia, the priestess who served as the oracle, would deliver her often ambiguous prophecies from a chamber filled with intoxicating vapors. If her words warned of a flood, the entire political and religious machinery of the state would mobilize. The prophecy could dictate where a new colony was founded, insisting it be built on the highest ground possible. It could mandate the creation of new festivals to appease Poseidon, the earth shaker. The psychological power of these figures was immense. A single pronouncement could alter the migration patterns of an entire people, redirect trade routes, and forge a cultural identity rooted in the shared memory of a narrowly avoided catastrophe. This power, however, was rarely free from worldly influence. The ruling class understood the immense authority these prophecies held. They often controlled access to the oracles and could shape the interpretation of the visions to serve their own political needs. A prophecy about a flood could be used to justify taxing the populace to build new fortifications or to consolidate power by claiming divine mandate. The stones, therefore, are more than just records of mystical experiences. They are the tangible legacy of a complex negotiation between the human and the supernatural, between genuine spiritual insight and the pragmatic needs of power. They stand as permanent monuments to the individuals who dared to listen to the whispers of the gods and to the societies that chose to carve those whispers into eternity. The voice of the shaman may have faded, but their warning, set in stone, continues to speak across the centuries. A king does not merely rule the land. He rules the story. When a prophecy of a great flood swept through his kingdom, he did not fear it. He wielded it. By claiming a unique divine mandate, a direct line to the gods who warned him of the coming waters, his authority became absolute. His command to build granaries on high ground or to move entire cities was no longer a suggestion. It was a divine instruction, and to disobey was to defy the gods themselves and risk annihilation. This was the ultimate political tool, transforming a leader into a savior and his rule into a matter of survival. The very knowledge of the catastrophe became a source of immense power, carefully controlled and released to shape public behavior and demand unwavering loyalty. Commissioning a prophecy stone was the ancient equivalent of a grand public relations campaign. It was a permanent monument not just to the gods, but to the ruler's own foresight and piety. Carved in the town square or at a sacred crossroads, the stone served as a constant reminder of the leader's special connection to the divine. It created an official, unchangeable narrative that served the state. The story was now set in stone, literally, and any challenge to the king's authority could be framed as a challenge to the sacred prophecy itself. This narrative control was a masterstroke of political engineering. In times of failure, the prophecy offered a perfect escape for those in power. If a lesser flood did strike despite their efforts, it could be explained not as a failure of the king's planning, but as a result of the people's own moral failings. The gods were still angry, the narrative went, because the populace had not been devout enough or had not obeyed the king's commands completely. This brilliant tactic shifted all blame from the leadership onto the shoulders of the common people, reinforcing the need for even stricter obedience and greater tribute to appease the heavens. The prophecy, intended as a warning for all, could be twisted into a weapon for the few. This manipulation of myth for control is a thread that runs unbroken through history. The stones we unearth are not always pure records of spiritual revelation. They are often carefully crafted instruments of power, their messages polished to serve a political agenda. Recognizing this political dimension is crucial. It prevents us from taking every carved warning at face value and forces us to ask who benefited from the story being told in that particular way. It reveals that the fear of water was not just a force of nature, but a force that could be channeled to build empires and command absolute allegiance. This understanding of how ancient power worked with prophecy now leads us to a pivotal question. How does our modern scientific world reinterpret these same primal fears? A modern climate scientist sees the same ancient cataclysm, but through a different lens. Instead of carved symbols, she reads the story in a cylinder of ancient ice. This is the field of paleoclimatology, the science of reconstructing Earth's ancient weather. It uses natural archives to read the planet's history. Tree rings record seasons of drought and deluge in their tight grain. Layers of sediment at the bottom of lakes preserve pollen and ash from forgotten landscapes. And deep within the ice sheets of Greenland and Antarctica, long cores contain tiny bubbles of the atmosphere itself, trapped for thousands of years, a direct sample of the air the ancients breathed. These are the planet's own inscribed stones, written not in language but in chemistry and physics. This data reveals moments of brutal, rapid change. One such event, known as the 8.2 kiloyear event, occurred roughly 6,200 years before the Common Era. Ice cores show a sudden, dramatic cooling, likely caused by the catastrophic drainage of a giant glacial lake in North America. This pulse of fresh water into the ocean could have disrupted global weather patterns for generations, causing superstorms, failing harvests, and a rapid rise in sea levels that would have drowned coastal settlements worldwide. This is not speculation, it is a data point. When researchers compare the timeline of this climatic shock with the estimated origins of flood myths from the same period, the correlation is startling. It suggests that a real, global environmental trauma is the common ancestor of all these stories. Genetic science adds another powerful layer to this investigation. By analyzing the DNA of modern human populations, researchers can trace major migration patterns deep into the past. They can identify genetic bottlenecks, moments when our ancestors' numbers plummeted, and track the routes they took to survive. Some of these great human journeys show signs of being sudden, forced displacements. Could one of these genetic footprints be the exodus of a people fleeing rising waters, their flight immortalized later in the story of a great ark or a guided boat? Science does not seek to debunk the myth. Instead, it seeks to find the seed of truth buried within the cultural storytelling. The supernatural warning from a god becomes the logical conclusion drawn by a surviving elder who observed the weather patterns and the rising tides. The great fish that tows the boat becomes a metaphor for following migrating sea life to safer shores. This rigorous re-examination transforms the prophetic stones from objects of superstition into a profound dataset on human resilience. They become case studies in how our ancestors processed overwhelming disaster, how they found meaning in chaos, and how they encoded survival strategies into stories meant to outlive them. This new understanding reveals a pattern we are only now beginning to fully appreciate, a rhythm of catastrophe and recovery that echoes not only through our past but directly into our present. This recurring rhythm of catastrophe echoes across the world's oldest beliefs. The ancient Maya did not fear a single, final flood. They anticipated a sequence of world ages, each one cleansed by a different elemental fury. Hindu sages spoke of kalpas, vast cycles of cosmic creation and dissolution where the universe itself is unmade and remade. Even Plato, in his story of Atlantis, hinted at periodic destructions sent by the gods, some by fire and others by water. This was not a belief in random chaos. It was a sophisticated philosophical conclusion that disaster is woven into the very fabric of time, a necessary reset for a world grown old or corrupt. These cultures, separated by oceans and millennia, arrived at the same profound observation. The natural world is built on cycles. We see it in the daily journey of the sun, the monthly phases of the moon, and the annual turn of the seasons. These ancient thinkers simply extended that logic to its ultimate conclusion, proposing that the grandest scale of existence, the life and death of civilizations, must also follow a cyclical pattern. This idea may have been more than just philosophical reasoning. It could be a folk memory of real, recurring cataclysms. Modern paleoclimatology has uncovered evidence of dramatic climate oscillations that occurred long before recorded history. Events like Heinrich events, where armadas of icebergs broke from glaciers and chilled the oceans, or Dansgaard Easter events, which saw temperatures spike upward in a matter of decades, would have caused sea levels to yo-yo and weather patterns to collapse. For the survivors, these would not have been one-time anomalies. They would have been the terrifying, predictable return of a monster, a cycle of destruction that their descendants needed to be prepared for. This changes how we must view the inscribed floodstones. They are not merely tombstones for a single, lost world. They are instruction manuals for the next turn of the wheel. The prophecy carved into the rock becomes a timeless survival guide, a set of principles meant to be relevant not just for one generation, but for all generations to come. This perspective unites the anxieties of the ancient world with the stark realities of our modern one. We now understand that Earth's climate is not static. It has always cycled between ice ages and warm periods. The ancient fear of a returning flood finds its echo in our contemporary fear of rising seas and supercharged storms. Their cyclical view of history forces us to confront a sobering possibility. Our own civilization, for all its technological might, is not an exception to this ancient pattern. We are simply living in the calm between the storms. This deep-seated fear of drowning is more than a simple phobia. It is a foundational layer of human consciousness, a collective nightmare that these flood myths both tap into and profoundly reinforce. These prophecies are not just dusty historical accounts. They function as archetypal narratives, the fundamental blueprints that shape how entire cultures perceive danger, nature, and the divine. The story is almost always the same. A world is wiped clean, and from the devastation, a handful of righteous survivors are chosen to begin again. This powerful motif turns the ultimate catastrophe into a narrative of hope and resilience. It whispers that even in the face of total annihilation, life finds a way, and humanity is granted a second chance. This is not just a happy ending. It is a psychological necessity, a way for a traumatized culture to process its own vulnerability and find a reason to carry on. This shared experience becomes a form of cultural trauma, a memory of powerlessness that echoes through the centuries. It influences everything from the epic poems of ancient Sumer to the grand paintings of the Renaissance, where artists depicted the terror of the Deluge and the salvation of the Ark. It is woven into the very fabric of religious practice, where rituals of cleansing with water recall that primal fear and the promise of purification. The act of carving the prophecy into stone is itself a profound psychological act. Faced with the uncontrollable chaos of a natural disaster, the human mind seeks to impose order. By chiseling the event into a permanent narrative, our ancestors transformed a random, terrifying act of nature into a story with a clear moral, a divine warning, and a vital lesson for the future. The flood was no longer meaningless. It happened because humanity grew arrogant, or because the gods were angry, or because the cosmic cycle demanded it. This act of storytelling gave the catastrophe a reason, and a reason can be endured. This deep psychological embedding ensured the memory of the flood, whether based on a real event or a powerful collective fear, was passed down not as a simple fact, but as a core part of a culture's identity. It became ingrained in the cultural DNA, a story told to children not just to frighten them, but to prepare them. This explains the relentless power and persistence of these stories. They are not merely tales, they are survival mechanisms for the human spirit. This is why the search for the stones that bear these warnings continues to captivate us, driving modern expeditions into remote deserts and fueling sophisticated research in university labs. We are not just looking for ancient rocks, we are searching for the physical anchors of our deepest fears and our most enduring hopes. A carved stone can ring with a deep, resonant hum when struck in just the right place. This is not a random quality of the rock, but a deliberate acoustic design. The emerging field of archaeoacoustics investigates how ancient builders engineered their monuments to harness the power of sound. At sites like Göbekli Tepe, researchers have discovered that the massive T-shaped pillars are not merely carved with symbols, they possess specific sonic properties. A voice spoken near one of these pillars can be amplified, its echoes creating an otherworldly effect. When struck with a mallet, certain monoliths produce low, resonant tones that seem to vibrate deep within your chest. This was not an accident. The builders selected these stones and shaped them with an understanding of their acoustic potential. Imagine a ritual held under the stars 11,000 years ago. A shaman, perhaps aided by rhythmic drumming or psychoactive plants, enters a trance state. The air thrums with the low-frequency tone emanating from the stone itself. This sound would have been perceived not as a simple noise, but as the literal voice of the spirit world. The vibration traveling through the ground and the air could induce altered states of consciousness, making the shaman more receptive to visions. In this heightened reality, the prophecy of a great flood was not just seen in a dream. It was heard, felt in the bones, and channeled directly from the resonating stone. The monolith was transformed from a silent canvas into an active instrument of revelation. Its voice was believed to carry the warning to the gods or to imbue the carving with a living, spiritual presence. This multi-sensory experience would have made the prophecy feel overwhelmingly real and divine. The stone was no longer a passive billboard for a message. It was a participant in the ritual, a conduit between the human and the supernatural. This profound understanding of sound adds a breathtaking layer to our interpretation of these ancient warnings. It suggests the prophecies were delivered through a sophisticated technology of consciousness, a blend of geology, acoustics, and spiritual practice. The stones did not just hold a message, they spoke it, and their voice was designed to be unforgettable. This quest to hear the echoes of the past drives modern explorers to the world's most isolated ruins, hoping to find another stone waiting to share its story. A high-resolution satellite image reveals the ghost of a wall beneath a dense jungle canopy, a geometric shape that nature never makes. This is the new frontier in the search for prophecy stones, where technology acts as a key for lost doors. Light detection and ranging, or LiDAR, fires millions of laser pulses from an aircraft, stripping away the vegetation digitally to map the ground beneath. It allows us to see the ancient world as a vast archaeological chessboard, revealing forgotten roads, plazas, and the foundations of temples that might hold undiscovered monoliths. Ground-penetrating radar performs a similar magic on a smaller scale, sending radio waves into the earth and reading the echoes to pinpoint buried structures without ever breaking the soil. These tools have transformed the search from one of back-breaking labor and luck into a targeted scientific investigation. The goal is no longer just to find a stone, but to find the right stone, one that could act as a universal translator for these ancient warnings. Imagine an inscription that not only describes a great flood but names a specific king or details an astronomical event we can date with precision. Such a discovery would be the Rosetta Stone of Cataclysm, directly linking a global myth to a verifiable moment in time. This quest sends interdisciplinary teams to the most remote corners of the planet. Archaeologists work alongside linguists who can decipher a newly found script, geologists who can date the stone and source its material, and local historians who carry the oral traditions that often guide the entire endeavor. An expedition might dive into a cenote, a deep natural well in the Yucatan once sacred to the Maya, scanning its submerged walls for carvings. Another team might rappel into a high Andean cave, a place ancient people might have used to safeguard their most important knowledge from rising waters. The motivation driving these modern explorers is profound. It is a blend of rigorous science and a deep, almost primal curiosity, confirming that a specific, widespread flood myth is based on a real event would rewrite the early chapters of human history. It would prove that our ancestors were not just storytellers, but witnesses and survivors who went to incredible lengths to ensure we would not forget. Each potential discovery, each anomalous shape on a radar screen, carries the electric promise of a direct message, a voice from a prehistory that is far more sophisticated and globally connected than our textbooks ever suggested. This relentless, technologically aided search proves that the power of these ancient warnings has not faded. It has evolved, compelling us to look deeper and listen more carefully, because the next stone uncovered could be the one that changes everything. The stones were never meant to be relics of a forgotten past. Their warnings echo directly into our present, a world now facing its own prophesied deluge. Today, the rising waters are not a punishment from angry gods, but a direct consequence of human industry, a global environmental crisis of our own making. The ancient message carved into rock resonates with terrifying clarity that human actions or our collective inaction can summon a catastrophic flood. These civilizations understood that survival was not guaranteed. Their responses, whether through massive engineering projects like emperor-used canals or through spiritual preparation and migration to higher ground, determined whether their culture would persist or vanish. The stones stand as a stark rebuke to our own hubris and short-term thinking, urging us to read the signs written in our own melting glaciers and intensifying storms. The cyclical view of history found in Maya and Vedic traditions suggests that disaster is not a matter of if, but when. Preparation is the only thread that connects one age to the next. By studying how these cultures processed their trauma, memorializing it in myth and stone, we gain a blueprint for resilience. They teach us that survival hinges on foresight, on the willingness to make difficult choices today for a safer tomorrow. The ultimate challenge these ancient artifacts lay before us is profound. We are called to become the wise elders for a future we will never see. Our inscription will not be carved into granite monoliths, but written into international climate accords, encoded in sustainable technologies, and embodied in the very structure of our societies. The stones ask us what story we will leave behind, a tale of ignorance and collapse, or a legacy of foresight carved not in rock, but in action. These inscribed stones are a testament to humanity's enduring struggle against nature's greatest forces. They are far more than ancient relics gathering dust in museums. From the cuneiform tablets of Mesopotamia to the rain god stelae of the Maya, these artifacts form a global network of shared memory, linking civilizations that never met through a common story of watery cataclysm. We have traced their journey from the quarries where they were born, through the painstaking decipherment of their symbols, and into the very heart of the cultures that wielded them as both spiritual guides and political tools. The recurring theme echoing from every continent is not one of despair, but of profound resilience. It is the unwavering belief that from utter destruction comes the possibility for renewal, and that knowledge, once carefully preserved, becomes the ultimate lifeline thrown across the centuries to future generations. As we now navigate our own era of rising seas and climatic upheaval, these ancient voices speak with renewed urgency. They compel us to listen, to learn from the past, and to act with the foresight our ancestors tried so desperately to impart. Let these stones stand as a permanent reminder that the most powerful prophecies are not unchangeable destinies carved in rock, but urgent warnings we still possess the power to alter. If this journey into humanity's deepest fears and most resilient hopes has resonated with you, we invite you to subscribe for more explorations into the mysteries of our shared past. We would be fascinated to hear your thoughts on these ancient warnings in the comments.